All right, today we are diving into a really powerful sermon that asks a question that's, well, it's pretty pointed. What does it actually mean to truly care? And maybe more importantly, how can that care build communities that push back against the indifference we see all around us? It all kicks off with one central, challenging question. You know, the foundation of this whole message isn't some deep, complicated theological argument. Nope. It really just boils down to one very personal, very direct question that kind of sets the stage for everything else. And there it is. The sermon just puts it right out there for us. Do you really care? The whole point is that without a genuine yes to this question, all the talk about faith or action, well, it's pretty much meaningless. This is square one for building what the source calls a godly community of resistance. Now, this is where things get really interesting. Because look at how it frames the problem. The message here is that the true opposite of love isn't hate, it's just indifference. This quote from George Bernard Shaw just nails it, right? The idea that simply not caring is the real core of inhumanity. And it's that indifference that we're being called to resist. Okay, so if we're called to care, what exactly are we supposed to be pushing back against? Well, the sermon gets really specific about certain patterns in our culture that this kind of active compassion is meant to stand against. So the source lays out a pretty clear list. It's not some vague, general evil. It's specific mindsets. Things like just blindly conforming to whatever the world is doing, or oppressive systems, and yeah, that hyper-individualistic me generation attitude. The sermon even takes a shot at so-called common sense, but a huge, huge focus is on resisting any force that tries to slice us up into a comfortable us and some kind of threatening them. And the sermon gets even more specific, calling out one of these divisive forces by name. It defines white Christian nationalism like this: an ideology that often wraps itself up in the flag of patriotism, but at its heart, it argues that to be a true American, you have to fit this very narrow white Christian identity. You can see how that immediately creates a serious us and them dynamic. And this slide just perfectly illustrates the contradiction the sermon is pointing to. On one side, you have the claim of being a Christian nation, but on the other, you've got policies and actions that seem to go completely against core Christian teachings. You know, things like picking revenge over forgiveness, mistreating immigrants, or attacking political opponents. The argument here is simple. Your actions speak way louder than your labels. So this brings us to a really fascinating and nuanced part of the whole discussion, the idea of privilege. Instead of treating it like something to feel guilty or defensive about, the sermon completely reframes it as a potential tool for doing a whole lot of good. Right, so here's the crucial point. Privilege itself is presented as morally neutral. It doesn't matter if it comes from your race, your job, or how much money you have, it's just a part of someone's reality. The thinking is, you don't need to feel guilty about it or deny it. The real moral question isn't, do you have it? It's what are you gonna do with it? And here are the two paths laid out for us. Path one is inaction. That's getting stuck in guilt or just pretending privilege doesn't exist. But path two, the one the sermon calls godly resistance, is totally different. It's about looking your privilege square in the eye, acknowledging it, and then actively using it as a tool to fight for others. Okay, so to make this all a bit more practical and less abstract, the source gives us two incredible case studies from the Bible. Two very different people who chose that second path, the path of action, and used what they had to make a real difference. First up, we've got Nehemiah. I mean, this guy, as the source explains, had it made. He was the cupbearer to the most powerful king in the world. He had influence, he had safety, he had luxury. He was the ultimate insider, a perfect example of someone with enormous privilege. But just look at his response when he finds out his people are in trouble. It's this clear, four-step process. First, he actually cared enough to ask what was going on. Then, he was genuinely heartbroken by the news. He wept. He followed that up with prayer. But, and this is the key part, he didn't stop there. The final crucial step was that he acted. He volunteered to leave his cushy life and use his position to go and physically rebuild his community. And the second model? In many ways, he's the total opposite. This is the Samaritan, an outsider, part of a group that was despised by the man he finds beaten up on the road. He's the perfect example of someone who resists that us versus them mentality, even when he has every single cultural reason to just keep on walking. Oh, this slide is just brilliant. It boils down the entire moral choice to one simple flip of a question. The religious insiders, the priest and the Levite, they asked, what's going to happen to me if I stop? They were worried about themselves, their safety, their schedule. But the Samaritan, he flipped the question completely. He asked, what's going to happen to him if I don't stop? That tiny shift in perspective, that's everything. So how do we get there? How do we go from feeling that conviction to actually taking action, like Nehemiah or the Samaritan? Well, the sermon lays out a pretty clear pathway for us. This quote really drives home the whole purpose of faith in this context. The point isn't just to send a list of requests up to heaven. It's about aligning ourselves with God's will and then becoming the people who help bring that will to life, right here, right now. Prayer is the catalyst, not the conclusion. And here's how that path breaks down. It all starts with kindness, which the sermon says is the simple choice to care. That choice then grows into compassion. That's kindness in motion. And this leads to acts of grace and mercy, which is a totally countercultural thing to do in a world screaming at you to just look out for yourself. It all culminates in one simple thing: action. You see a need and you meet that need. So if there's one single sentence that sums up this entire explainer, it's this right here. After all the stories, all the definitions, it really comes down to this: caring is a verb. It isn't just a passive emotion that happens to us. It's an active choice we make. And that leaves us with the final question. You see, it's not, do you care anymore? The sermon assumes if you follow the logic, the answer is yes. So the question becomes a challenge, a call to action that goes way beyond this explainer. What need will you meet?